So it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our alumni of the year, Randall J. Olson, MD. I think you heard Rachel this morning say that he was an undergraduate student, medical student here at the University of Utah. He was an ophthalmology resident at Jules Stein at UCLA. He did cornea fellowships both in Gainesville, Florida, and in New Orleans, and joined the faculty there, and then was convinced to come to the University of Utah to take over what was then a one-person division in the Department of Surgery. Within a short period of a few years, he changed that to department status and has kind of built things into what they are now. And I have some perspective on that because the first year he was here, 1979, I met with him. Dr. Olson was instrumental in my career decision to do ophthalmology. You know, I went to talk to him about it, and he was instrumental. He and Alan Crandall, Mano Swartz, and convincing me to do ophthalmology, mainly him. And he was so excited about ophthalmology and what was going on. And, you know, looking back at that beginning and then building not one, but two Moran Eye Centers. The first, so we would have a freestanding clinical center of excellence, and the second, with the vision to bring clinical enterprise and the research side under one roof so that we could collaborate. And now into a place that is literally known around the world and a very desirable place to train and practice. High retention of faculty. Our residents go on to do great things. I think for those of us who've been here for a while, wonder if we would even compete and get a slot with the current residents that we have. And most of the faculty here are here because of Dr. Olson and what he's done, his management style, and you know, we'd all walk through fire for him. I mean, it's been a great experience. And so it is, my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Olson. And again, he is the CEO, chair, distinguished university professor, a whole long list of titles, all of which he has earned and are very well deserved. We're pleased to have him here to speak to us, and particularly with all of the time he has spent in this enterprise as it has evolved under his direction. He's going to talk to us about some of the lessons he's learned along the way. Dr. Olson.
Thank you. Bob, you're very kind. Appreciate your kind comments. And I remember you as a medical student. I was not many years over you in regards to, but I was so green, but I certainly had enthusiasm and proud of you and all that you've done to move forward. And so many of you of what you've had. And there's an incredible legacy for all the residents, the rest, to continue to proceed and go forward. So let's see, advance this one, right? Oh, that's it. Okay. All right, I'm good. I got it. So no problem. So yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that I've learned over the years and some of the things I've learned in just watching mistakes and the rest that happen out there in life. And I hope you find it enlightening and can learn a little bit. We're going to start out here with Dr. Jan Wurst. It's spelled actually Wurst, and I'll never forget the first time that I met him. He says, my name is Jan, and I'm the worst ophthalmologist in the country. He wasn't, obviously, but Jan was one of the real pioneers early on in regards to intraocular lenses. And he made some worthy changes in the rest, and there was a lot that I had that was certainly proud in regards to Jan. But he absolutely refused to accept that you ever needed anything other than loupes to do cataract surgery. He refused to accept that anyone should use phacoemulsification or an operating microscope, but it was even worse than that. He would not let anybody in his clinic use any of that. Now, this kind of behavior is not uncommon. There's some great studies that have shown that often luminaries in a field will totally retard additional advancement until you die or retire. Because the assumption is that I know best and I make the decisions and are willing to consider change and improvements. I'm going to give you another example of this with my good friend Tom Zimmerman. Now, Tom Zimmerman and I were the first two to start at the LSUI Center. We were the only two alone. He picked me up in a Pantera, which is a car that was tremendously over horsepowered without anything else in it. I think essentially all of them were wrecked. And decided to show me, when he picked me up in the LSU parking lot, how he could get it up to 70 miles an hour before he had to take a turn on the next one. I was like, I'm out of here. This is it. There's no way I'm going to deal with this crazy man. But here's the story he told. So his field is glaucoma. Many people consider one of the fathers of timolol, and a big advance over what we had back in those particular days. But he was in Europe, was presenting on that. And one of the luminaries in ophthalmology in Europe was giving a talk about the corneal endothelium. I could talk on, and we could have a whole hour about what it was they were saying and all of the mistakes that were made. But at that time, University of Florida, they were doing the most cutting-edge human specular microscopy. And they were getting studies, and they were showing the things we now accept as science of what would happen, but they weren't accepted at that time. So he raised his hand, and this luminary, I don't want to embarrass him here at this particular point, but as somebody who I know, and he was pretty pompous, so it doesn't surprise me. And he just said, well, I want you to know that that's not correct of what you said. He said, we've learned from specular microscopy this, and this, which was absolutely true. And he said, Rudy just stopped there and just stared at him. I already told you the name. I shouldn't have said this. He just sat there and stared at him. Who are you? He said, well, I'm Tom Zimmerman. I'm from University of Florida. What's your position? He said, I'm a fellow. He said, well, I am blank, and I am world famous. I don't have to listen to you. Now, this happens also way too often. The authority situation, that suddenly if somebody's in a strong position, that they are the ones who say what's right or wrong. Never should authority determine what is right and wrong, or what is true science. I know, Judith. We could go on that for a while. I'm not going to go there. I'm not turning this into a political lecture. But here is the worst example. Anybody know who this person is? Ignaz Semmelweis. Okay? Now here's an amazing story. So he was a Viennese doctor, and part of what he was able to do, because he was just new and getting started, is worked in the Viennese birthing center. Now, the birthing center was largely for prostitutes and single women, and the mortality rate for women there was 35%. 35%. So what was the excuse? Well, these were women of ill repute, single women. This was God who was out there, who was damaging them, and that's just the way it was. So he had this thought. And what was killing most of them was puerperal fever, which is group A beta hemolytic strep. And he just said, I just wonder if we're examining these women who are dying from puerperal fever and we wipe the pus on our apron to deliver babies, maybe we're just kind of infecting these women, and we're the ones that are doing it. So he said, what I'm going to do in the small unit I have over on the side, he says, I'm going to do something. I'm going to actually have us wash our hands after examining someone, and we're going to put our hands in carbolic acid, which was used to try to refresh waters and ponds and stuff that had all kinds of, green gunk and the stuff growing in them, and see if that would make a difference. Guess what? His mortality rate dropped from 35% to less than 1%. And he said, Eureka, this is simple. This just takes a second. We're going to wash our hands with soap, little carbolic acid, I can change it. So he was excited. He presented this at the Viennese Society as this great breakthrough in the rest. So what do you think the reaction was? They were horrified. You're implying that we're killing those women? You're implying that we don't know what we're doing? This is God's punishment. How dare you? They drummed him out of Vienna. They drummed him out of the society. He went on in an outlying unit to repeat the same results, and in his frustration at so many women needlessly dying of what the medical profession was causing, later on in life, to showcase this, he took some of the pus from puerperal fever to infect his finger and died from sepsis. Now, what a story. Now, we're not talking much longer after that before the germ theory of disease started to become accepted. And people like Koch and Pasteur and others came along. He was just a little before his time. But wouldn't it have been amazing if we had understood the germ theory of disease and for all of the different events like the Civil War? We'd have saved so many individuals. Again, an example of where tremendous mistakes are made because of lack of understanding, but particularly a huge problem that we see all too often, and that is human ego. Human ego that isn't willing to accept that we're wrong and isn't willing to accept that somebody may have a better idea. So we'll go on to our own Greg Hageman. So Greg, he was actually a marine biologist. Many of you maybe don't know that story. And when he married Jill, he just thought it was great living on Santa Catalina in this little place out in the ocean going around. He says, you got to get a real job. You got to decide to move on. And he kind of got interested in a little bit about retina. So he decided to do a postdoc at USC looking at retina. Now, one of the advantages he had is he didn't know what he didn't know about this. And he was amazed that there was not any good, fresh human pathology tissue of macular degeneration at the time. So he said, this is something we've got to change. So he just started sitting around the pathologist's office until they got a few fresh specimens. They looked at them really carefully and looked at this thing called drusen. They're full of complement. The immune system has to have something to do with about it. Now, Robert Mark, our previous director of research, was at the time doing a postdoc at UCLA when he heard about this and said people thought he was insane because everybody knows that macular degeneration is an aging condition. If you have long enough, everybody's going to get it. Immune system, that is ridiculous. We all know that's not right. Well, he continued to work on it, and finally he had enough that he could get together. He submitted a grant to the National Eye Institute. He gets a call about a month later from Carl Kupfert, the head of the National Eye Institute. He said, Dr. Hageman, I see this grant, and you're submitting something suggesting the complement system has to do with macular degeneration. And he said, everybody knows this is an aging change that you'll get if you live long enough, and the NEI will never fund this type of research. So just go and do something else. Well, he didn't. He got some private grants, and he had a humbled Carl Kupfer call him about 3 years later. He says, maybe I was a little hasty. You should maybe can submit a grant for us to consider. Of course, we know how important the immune system is in complement putting on. So that's in relatively recent times. Authority should never trump science. And we need to have the humility. We need to have the humility. Oh, come on, Judith. I should have taken that out of there. All right. That's a gotcha again. Okay, all right, I hear you. And we need to have humility to understand there is so much we don't know, so much we don't understand already. I'm going to go into this a little deeper here for a little bit. So this is Charlie Kelman. I had a chance to know him very well. Charlie Kelman, early on, is really the father of phacoemulsification, came up with the Kelman tip, said this is going to be much better. And everybody was using it. And I wondered, does this Kelman tip, is it really better in regards to how we're doing phacoemulsification? And it really wasn't until we had our own Brian Stagg, who was doing research with me, clear back as a medical student. I said, we need to check and see if this really improves our efficiency. And I'm cutting to the chase really fast because I have a lot more I want to talk about. Lo and behold, when you look at it, it actually cuts your efficiency in half and doubles your chatter rate. It was not an advance. However, If you hadn't had a Kelman tip, we would never have been able to develop something like Osel because the traditional straight tips just don't function with that kind of action. So sometimes it may take a little time for the right indication to be there. And I think too fast we are wanting to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We need to give it some time. We need to understand exactly what's happening. That was certainly true with phacoemulsification. I mean, the instruments that we used back when I was a resident in the 70s, I mean, you got to 30 millimeters of mercury aspirate and you were totally evacuating the anterior chamber with each post-occlusion surge. No wonder these corneas looked so crummy the next day. We were literally wiping out the corneal endothelium. And many people were horrified about this new instrumentation, but that's the standard today, and it advanced and got better. So we got to remember that as well. So Bob Sinskey is another good friend. He's the one who taught me phacoemulsification. We were able to do it at UCLA, and he was a real pioneer. He'd come and I got to know him extremely well. He told me this fascinating story. So anybody here in the room have heard of the diagnosis of an athlete's heart? Got anybody here know? So some of you are shaking your head. So Bob Sinskey was a wrestler. He was an exercise fanatic, and he was in a military academy. This is back in, in what would be a high school at that particular point in his life. When in his annual physical that they had for all of them there, he was diagnosed with athlete's heart. And he was told this was really bad. And he said the solution is you will climb no steps. You are to walk as little as possible. You do as little as possible. That's the only way you'll solve this. And so he agreed to do all of that. And indeed, his athlete's heart disappeared. Here's another example. Anybody recognize this picture? Teddy Roosevelt. This is Teddy back in the day. He was about a 17-year-old when he went to Harvard. And a lot of people may not know that he had a horrendous asthma as a kid. Very, very weak. Family despaired that he was going to survive. And as he got into his later teenage years, it finally went away. And his joy de vivre was so great, he would do stuff they considered insane in the day. He'd love to just go out and run, okay? This is stupid. He loved to climb trees. So in his freshman exam, the Harvard physician that looked at him diagnosed him with athlete's heart and said, Teddy, he says, you're going to be, or Mr. Roosevelt, you're going to be dead in 10 years if you don't quit this infernal running around and climbing trees and all this other stuff. And Teddy famously said to the surgeon, he said, I'd rather be dead in 10 years than give up my running and climbing trees and all my activities. So what is athlete's heart? It's a low pulse rate. What happens when you're really well physically trained? You get a low pulse rate. This diagnosis persisted all the way into World War II. Solution was to cut down your activity. Yes, if you're no longer physically fit, your pulse goes back up to 65, 70, something like that. But these aren't people that had a disease. These are people that are incredibly fit. So why did it finally get looked at seriously? Even though this diagnosis was thrown on over and over, and I found a lot of other examples in regards to this. It was our first elite troops, paratroopers, because they pushed them through so hard. If you want to read about what happened or see this, just do the series Band of Brothers. It's absolutely outstanding talking about this. They all had athletes' hearts, every single one of them. Somebody finally said, we're not going to have an elite force. Maybe this is just part of fitness, and maybe we should not have that as a way of eliminating paratroopers. And lo and behold, they did just fine. So I ask you, what are some of the things we have today that may be athletes' heart? Don't be so proud to think that we don't have other areas. It takes, again, some humility and recognition that there is, so much more that we need to know and understand, and that we need to be very open-minded. So question the accepted wisdom is critical to advances. And I think that we've worked really hard to have an atmosphere of acceptance here. Alan Crandall, I miss him every day, but here's an interesting story. he was back at Shea Institute back when Harold Shea was the one in charge, and Harold was a luminary. He also did not believe in phacoemulsification, intraocular lenses, anything like that, and would fire anybody in his department who utilized those procedures. So Alan had to sneak out and work with other people to learn those skill set in order to move forward. So this is way more common than I think a lot of us are willing to understand and believe. So it's important to just be open-minded and a bit skeptical to move forward. So another thing that we've got to be careful with, though, is that when there is a problem, we blame the product and not something else. So this is one of my first research projects that I had involved, and that's a really sad-looking eye, and what I can tell you is that's fungal endophthalmitis. And it's an earth fungus, Pachyliomyces lilacinus. And we had a group of patients there at UCLA who had had successful surgery and had an intraocular lens, and then over 3 to 4 months, this started to happen. So what happened? What went wrong here? Back in those days, it was what's called wet sterilization. The lenses were soaked in sodium hydroxide, and then they were brought out of sodium hydroxide and put in a solution of bicarbonate of soda, then rinsed off to make sure that the lens was safe to put inside of the eye. And a company called Luminex, which is one of the fastest growing companies in Southern California, which was kind of the mainstay of intraocular lenses back in the 70s, had an entire batch of sodium bicarbonate of soda that was contaminated with this fungus. There were a lot of cases. Fortunately, the word went out soon enough that we didn't have hundreds and hundreds, but there were a lot of cases. All of them ended up with fungal endophthalmitis. All of them ended up losing their eye. Every one of them. Now, this was one of my first publications, was a co-author, but I did a lot of the work to put this overall series together. This is one of the main causes of the Devices Act. Before that, devices did not need approval. If you were a certified doctor, you could use or utilize essentially anything. But this particular one, it was utilized by all of those involved in being mad about intraocular lenses to say that intraocular lenses were bad. No. The problem was bicarbonate of soda was contaminated. There was a manufacturing process. It didn't mean, and it set back intraocular lenses, which those of you who had to deal with patients with aphakic spectacles, oh my gosh. In fact, I'll give you this little vignette. So as a resident at UCLA, my very first patient I operated on, and it was aphakic spectacles, and we were out about 4 months before you finally they were stable enough to get a refraction, gave her aphakic spectacles. She'd had a decent vision on the eye, and we were eventually going to have to get to a contact lens, but I gave her a refraction. She's looking around with this. Nothing's where it seems to be, and because you magnify a big area, but you lose it between, so it's called there's a ring scotoma and a jack-in-the-box effect. Stuff just pop in, and she looked around. And she was 20/20 corrected, and had been uncomplicated. I was really proud of it. She said, "Dr. Olson, could you put my cataract back?" Talk about popping my bubble. Well, and again, so the problem here was definitely not intraocular lenses. So a bad outcome may not mean the concept is flawed. And we need humility to look at it carefully, particularly where we're upset in general. And there was a lot of crazy stuff going on. Before the Devices Act, there were people who were going in their garages and making these things. There were lenses. I did an optical quality study in the early days. There were lenses that induced double vision and were not resolvable better than 20/40. I mean, there was some real junk coming out. But again, that was a manufacturing problem, not the lenses themselves. So RK, we already talked about it. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Told you about Gary Hall and his tactile feedback radial keratotomy and optical zones. He even had a few that were 0.75. They were disasters. But it took a while, and very large optical zones for just a little bit of fraction probably worked out all right. But there can be time to develop safe parameters. So when you see something new, look at the studies really pretty carefully and understand. And unless you really have good feeling about what you're doing, be careful about pushing the parameters out to the areas of danger. It's really hard when you've got a series of patients who come in who have a horrible outcome, and it's after the fact. So we've also got to be a little cautious, particularly when we're talking about the fact that these are people's vision. This is quality of life, right? So I mentioned Charlie already in the Kelman lens. He is the father of phacoemulsification, and I'll just go really rapidly that new technology competes with the established, so future improvements are not often considered. So give it some time. Understand what's ongoing, and we've had that in regards to femtosecond cataract surgery. There's been a lot of time looking at this, and I had Richard Hoffman tell me once as we were talking about this, there's only two things we absolutely know for sure are the case with flax, and that is it takes longer and costs more. I think there may be indeed indications where it's an advantage and the rest, but we've had it available, and most of the surgeons decided for most cases, indeed, that's all it does is take time and add cost. It doesn't provide a better result. But no matter who is involved in this, the adherents, those that are proposing new things, they have a duty to prove their point. I think it is their responsibility. It's not enough just to say, and we do too much of what I call the talking heads, key opinion leaders out there. Well, I've done such and such, and it's great. And they're not telling you that they're getting $85,000, $95,000, $100,000 from that company. And so conflict of interest is pretty high. They may notice that. But nobody's really bothered to look. That's one thing I'm proud of. And we've had a lot of residents and Brian Stagg, as I mentioned, Brian Zog, Bill Barr. I mean, we've had a lot of people who've been involved in the research we've had to try to find out what really works and debunk some of the stuff that companies propose without any study or data to show that what they're saying makes a difference. So, a few conclusions. Encourage to be open-minded about new technology. It's our future. Don't be hidebound. Listen to it. Watch it, okay? Encourage questioning of the accepted wisdom. That's how we make our biggest advances. It's people asking, why do we do that? Does that really make sense? Don't be afraid to do that. I promise you, there's a lot that I could talk about already that I know we're doing that I'm not sure really will make sense with time as we learn more about it. You think we needed to absolutely say we need solid studies for people to make claims. Claims should not be based on conjecture, certainly not conflicted conjecture. And that happens all too often. So I call that open-minded skepticism. Yes, I understand this may be important, but show me, what is it? What do we have? What can we really base making any, particularly when it's a significant change? So now I want to move to my favorite part of this study. So I'm a big believer that one of the important principles of resilience we have in life is to be able to be engaged in a lot of different endeavors and activities in our lives. And these will vary quite dramatically from person to person where they are. But I can tell you, for me, there's no question, there's nothing like our outdoors to give you a sense of perspective and a sense of understanding. I'm going to tell you about one of the trips that I did, and I think it is an important lesson in life. Certainly was for me. So I'm the dorky one with the weird hat on that you can see standing there, and this is 4 of us. And we had planned a trip where we were going to start by Pinedale and make our way up over the Wind River Mountains, and we were going to bag the highest peak in the Wind Rivers, which is Gannett Peak, then make our way and come out all the way into Pinedale. So we started over in Landor, and we come over to Pinedale. So this was about an 8-9 day trip that we were planning. We were going to bushwhack most of the way. This is back before GPSs, so this was all compass and topography, and I'd mapped out some ways that I thought were pretty innovative. They turned out to be a little wilder than I thought they would be as we made our way across. But here's the huge mistake I made. I knew we were pushing it hard, and I wanted to keep the weight as limited as possible. So I ended up planning for a calorie count or burning of about 1,500 calories a day. Big mistake. big mistake. We were burning, I think on the one day I'm going to talk about here, we tried to calculate it over 10,000 calories that day. Certainly, we never did less than 5,000 or 6,000 calories a day. So people were kind of dragging in regards to this overall trip. So this is the big day. We started down at Dinwiddie Stream at the base of Gannett Peak, and we climbed and made our way to the top of Gannett Peak. Here was my plan, right? I'm the one with the glasses on the one side that you can see on your left. I said, we're going to eat a lot of fish. We were often climbing so hard, and I had such aggressive daily schedules we had to do. We didn't have much time to fish. This is one time that we went out and caught a bunch of fish. But I can tell you that you can only eat so much fish, and it's hard to overcome a 5,000 or 6,000 calorie deficit on fresh trout. We tried. You need it. Till you couldn't eat it anymore, and then you were starving again in a couple hours, you could go out and fish. So that plan did not work particularly well. So here's making our way to the top of Gannett Peak. There are parts of it that would be semi-technical. We didn't do any of that. We just kind of plowed along. In some ways, I think a little foolhardy, but hey, we were young and full of vigor, and so we made our way on. The views from the top were unbelievable. The clarity of the skies back, and we're talking 40 years ago, were so good that you could see the Uintas from the top. Again, you can't do that anymore. You could see the Uintas off in the distance. Spectacular. So we made our way back. This is a picture of me making my way down on a cross. And you can see it's a pretty wild on one side. You certainly didn't want to have any height problem, or you were going to have serious trouble on that particular hike. Then we dropped down to the bottom. Why we planned all this one day, don't ask me. But then we had to climb about 3,500 feet to get at the top of Dinwiddie Pass, and that's looking into an area called Titcomb Basin, one of my favorite areas. Gorgeous spot moving in there. And already I knew a couple of our party were really lagging. And as we're sitting on top, making our way down, he decided to just sod down, lost complete control, bounced through some boulders. I'm thinking, I ran down, finally got him. He was badly bruised, otherwise okay. I don't know why we didn't camp somewhere on the Titcomb Lakes here, but we blew from here all the way over until we made our way to Island Lake. Not only that, Mother Nature decided to be tough on us, and we had a heavy rainstorm. We were soaking, sopping wet. We get into Island Lake, people are churlish and complaining and hammered and tired. So I tell the other three, go set up camp, I'll get us a meal. And in order to try to save a little bit of weight, rather than have a gas-powered stove, I had this thing called a chip stove, which you use little bits of pine. You can use pine cones, you can use anything. There was a little fan to help it work that we were using. It was pretty slow, not very efficient. I couldn't get it to work. Everything was soaking wet. So I'm sitting there thinking, what are we doing here? We were despondent. It was not a group of happy campers. When all of a sudden, the storm broke, and we had the most amazing alpenglow you could ever imagine. I'd heard about it, I'd seen a little bit. I have never, and this does not do justice because this was after it was fading. There was golden light around your hands and fingers and your hair. The air was luminous. And I yelled and I said, come out, come out. And people came out and we were jumping and laughing and crying. We couldn't believe this incredible beauty of nature. We were recharged for the rest of the trip and had a chance to see this amazing event that I'll never forget in my life. Now, life can be hard. You can have, there were some tough times that potentially can be there. But don't forget what's out there. Don't lose sight of so many of the simple things that are there. Mother Nature, I think, has given some of the biggest bounty, but it's the seeing your child for the first time, a baby's first laugh. There's all these great joys. And part of the reason that I enjoy trips like this so much is that you no longer take for granted some of life's simple pleasures. What do I look forward to so much? You know what? One of the huge pleasures we have, which is kind of unique to us at our time in life, a hot shower. A hot shower. How about a toilet? You think I'm kidding? Oh my gosh. And that we can have climate control. You know, we're not trying to bathe in an ice cold lake or freezing in the morning or cooking later on in the day. These are simple pleasures that we often take for granted. So this is another picture. This was part of our way as we made our way up. Looking down on the dry lakes was just absolutely spectacular. Can you see me? Can you make me out? Right up on top of the ridge, that's that tip. That's the view from the other side. I was going to go back. Yeah, there I am, right there. Got my hands out in the victory side. I was going to make my way down to get at the other top, but as I got over the side, it was very, very thin. Bob, I chickened out. I didn't do it. But there is a perspective that you have. And our problems are real, I get it, but we don't have the long view. We don't recognize the fact that the night is darkest just before sunrise, that things can evolve, they can move forward, they can get better. So please, please, take the long run, take the long view of things. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. It's been the honor of my life to be your leader. Can't thank you enough. Thank you.